Welcome, everyone. So let's talk about one of the biggest puzzles for anyone trying to reach financial independence. How in the world do you generate a really solid stream of income, mailbox money, without stalling your portfolio's growth or just handing over a massive slice of it to the taxman? Well, today we're going to dive deep into a fantastic case study that tackles this head-on. We're looking at a real-world three-fund strategy using NEOS ETFs that's built for high, tax-efficient income.
Okay, before we get into the nuts and bolts, we have to do the responsible thing and get the disclaimers out of the way. It's super important to remember that this is a case study. We're looking at it for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is absolutely not financial, tax, or investment advice. And the bottom line is always this: do your own homework. Your financial situation is totally unique. So you've got to talk with a licensed professional to make sure any strategy, including this one, actually makes sense for your personal goals and your risk tolerance. Okay, housekeeping is done. Let's get into the good stuff. This right here, this question is really the holy grail for so many of us on the financial independence journey, isn't it? It's that classic tug of war. You need the income to live on, but you don't want to kill the golden goose, the growth potential of your portfolio. And you definitely don't want to get wrecked by taxes. Today, we're going to unpack one potential answer, and it comes to us from a detailed case study by the team over at Blueprint to Escape. So here's our roadmap for today's case study. We'll start with the big picture, the high-yield income challenge itself. Then we'll zoom in on the NEOS ETFs and what makes them tick. From there, we'll get to the heart of it all, the three-fund case study. Then we'll tackle everyone's favorite topic, taxes, which is crucial here. And finally, we'll wrap up with some thoughts on building your own income strategy. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1. To really get this strategy, we first have to understand the tools we're working with. The engine behind this whole strategy is something called a covered call ETF. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty brilliant. The fund buys a bunch of stocks, let's say the biggest tech companies, then it turns around and sells contracts or call options on those stocks. Think of it like selling someone the right to buy your stocks later at a higher price. For selling that right, the fund collects cash, a premium, and then it passes that cash on to you as a monthly distribution. Pretty neat, right? But, and this is a big but, there's always a trade-off. The benefit, as you can see, is that potential for high monthly income. That income can also act as a nice cushion if the market is flat or goes down a bit. But here's the catch, the risk. By selling that option, you're agreeing to sell your stocks if they shoot up in value. This means your upside is capped. So in a rip-roaring bull market, these funds might lag behind. There's no free lunch in investing. Okay, so that's the general idea behind covered call ETFs. Now, let's look at why this case study focuses specifically on NEOS funds. They've put their own unique spin on this whole thing. The secret sauce for NEOS and what makes them so interesting for this case study is their sharp focus on two things: tax efficiency and preserving your capital. They achieve this partly through something called return of capital distributions. Now, in simple terms, this can mean that part of the money you get back each month is treated as if you're just getting your original investment back. This can push the tax bill down the road until you actually sell the fund, which is a huge advantage. All right, let's get to the main event. This is where the rubber meets the road. We're going to look at the exact three-fund combination that the Blueprint to Escape team uses as the income core of their portfolio. Pillar number one in this strategy is QQQI. This fund is based on the NASDAQ 100 index, so think of the biggest, baddest tech and growth companies out there: Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. That's what's under the hood here. So why QQQI instead of a broader fund that tracks the S&P 500? Well, the logic here is pretty straightforward. The team is making a concentrated, optimistic bet on the future of the tech sector. They figure since the S&P 500 is already so heavy with tech, why not just lean into it with QQQI and then use the rest of the portfolio to get diversification elsewhere? It's a very deliberate focus. Okay, next up, once you have a heavy concentration in U.S. tech, the very next logical step is to diversify, and that's where NIHI comes in. This is the portfolio's passport to the rest of the developed world. And this is just brilliant portfolio construction 101. By adding NIH, they're bringing in major companies from Europe, Australia, and the Far East. This gives them an income stream that hopefully doesn't move in perfect sync with the U.S. tech market. When one is down, the other might be up, giving the whole portfolio a bit more stability. That's the power of diversification. And for the third and final piece of this income core, we have something very 21st century, BTCI. This is a unique fund that gives you exposure to Bitcoin, but in a totally managed way. Look, a lot of people are intrigued by Bitcoin's potential,
but they're not too thrilled about dealing with digital wallets, private keys, and all that complexity. The thinking behind adding BTCI is simple. Let the pros at Neos handle it. Plus, and this is the really wild part, they use their option strategy to squeeze a high income stream from an asset that, by itself, pays you absolutely nothing.
So when you put it all together, you get this really interesting diversified core. You've got US tech, you've got international markets, and you've got digital assets. Now, those distribution yields look pretty eye-popping, I know, but it is so important to remember, this is just a snapshot in time. Past performance is never a guarantee of future results. You always have to go to the source, in this case, neosfunds.com, for the latest performance data. We've talked about the funds and the strategy, but now we need to discuss something that can make or break your returns. Taxes. I know, it's not the most exciting topic, but trust me, getting this part right is absolutely critical. Where you hold these funds matters a lot. Okay, for all our Canadian viewers, lean in because this is a huge deal. These are US-listed ETFs. That means the US government wants to take a 15% withholding tax on the dividends before you even see them. But thanks to a tax treaty, if you hold these funds in a retirement account like an RRSP or a RIF, that tax is waived. Poof, gone. However, if you hold them in a TFSA, you get hit with that 15% tax and you can't get it back. It's just a straight-up reduction of your return. So location is key. Now, for our friends in the US, the general advice is similar. Use those awesome tax-advantaged accounts like an IRA or 401k to let your income grow tax-deferred or tax-free. But there's another layer of complexity. These funds use special options contracts that fall under Section 1256 of the tax code. This has a really unique tax treatment. It's a blend of long-term and short-term gains, no matter how long you own the fund. The big takeaway here? This gets complicated fast. This is not the place for guesswork. You really need to talk to a qualified tax pro to figure out the best strategy for you. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. The funds, the strategy, the taxes. So let's bring it all home and talk about the key lessons you can take away from this case study as you think about your own income strategy. We really hope this deep dive was useful for you, but don't let the conversation end here. We'd love to know what you think. Drop your comments and questions below. We read all of them. And if you're on a journey toward financial independence, passive income, or designing a life of freedom, hit that subscribe button. Also, a huge shout out to the Blueprint to Escape team, who were kind enough to share a link to their complete, detailed portfolio right in the description below, so be sure to check that out. You know, at the end of the day, it's so important to remember why we're even talking about this stuff. A strategy like this, it's just a tool. It's not the goal itself. The real goal, as Chris Brogan says so perfectly here, is about living life on your own terms. It's about freedom. And so we'll leave you with that question to think about. What role could a strategy like this play in your financial journey? Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.